This is Jim Cantelon Today Television. This is Bible study for the 21st century. You know, friends, one of the things I love about JCT TV is I'm able to bring outstanding people your way. Dr. Van Johnson is no exception. He's the Dean of Master's Seminary. He's also Adjunct Professor of New Testament at Tyndale Seminary. Very highly regarded, very highly respected, PhD from the University of Toronto. And he's a specialist in what we call intertestamental prophetic content. He's fascinating, and you're going to love it. And there's going to be a surprise as well at the end of the show, so hang in with us.
Jim Cantelon Today is a program dedicated to the teaching of the good news of Jesus Christ. This all through the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. JCT also brings to you encouraging testimonies and stories from Christian leaders all over the globe. If this program has added value to your life, would you please consider becoming a partner? To do so, simply contact us by phone, mail, or online.
And as I mentioned off the top, friends, Dr. Van Johnson is my guest, and just in case you missed it, he is the Dean of Master's College and also the Adjunct Professor in New Testament at Tyndale Seminary, both located in Toronto and Peterborough, right?
College is in Peterborough, the seminary is in Toronto.
So you just kind of, you got one foot in Peterborough, one foot in Toronto?
All Toronto, all the time.
Oh, all Toronto all the time?
Yeah.
So all your courses are taught at Tyndale?
Everything's at Tyndale on their campus, right?
Okay. Now, some of us might find it a touch intimidating to be talking to someone who has a PhD. It's kind of a rarefied atmosphere for a lot of people, something that very few people achieve. But you've done it. You worked for many years, I know, at achieving it. But for us laymen, what was your thesis? What was it that you focused on and specialized in your PhD studies?
I worked with Richard Longnecker, a brilliant New Testament scholar. And when he received a new doctoral student, he'd like to push all of his students to not just focus on the New Testament text, but to focus on the period immediately before it, and then the period immediately after it. So typically, if his students were willing, and I was, as most were, we did some work in Jewish backgrounds. My particular one was the Jewish literature that would remind you of the book of Revelation, Jewish apocalyptic literature. Then he had us do some patristics, or the early church fathers, what was being written in the 2nd century, 3rd and 4th. So those were the parameters, and with many of his students, instead of then writing on something in the New Testament, many of us got interested in the context we had been introduced to. So I took on eschatology, in other words,
the end time theory.
End times, yeah. What's going on in the end times, and my particular angle was to track the way Old Testament ideas about the future morphed in an appropriate way into what you see in the New Testament. The primary shift being most prophetic eschatology. That's a good term. Yeah. The eschatological future that the prophets proclaimed. If Israel will, I will. If Israel won't, right? Different future. I tracked how that moved from the prophetic to something that starts catching some traction towards the end of the period that the Old Testament is written, called apocalyptic. That's a name that a lot of people use as adjectives. Oh, that was an apocalypse. That was an apocalyptic moment. Well, I actually studied what that meant in its context.
There was a movie called Apocalypse Now, by the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, yeah. The Jim Cantelon Today Show,
There you
Apocalypse
go. Very
Now. You're
apocalyptic.
very present focused, which I like about you. So I watched the way it morphed, and in particular I tracked Sheol.
Sheol, S-H-E-O-L.
The place, the common repository of the dead in the Old Testament. And I tracked, building on a few other scholars before me, the idea that it had already started to pick up some characteristics of the place where the wicked go rather than all people. And that gets accelerated in the apocalyptic period where and isn't it interesting, Jim, compared to Israel's neighbors way back in the day, the Israelites were slower to imagine what lay beyond this world. They weren't developing customs for burial that the Egyptians were or others were, because their focus was that God had made a covenant with them that he would bless them on a piece of land within time. And they were slower than their neighbors to think about another life because God had promised them this life, right? Today, now. So I tracked how that begins to shift. And if I was sitting in your chair, I'd be saying, well, Van, why does it shift? And I would say, after the Persian advantage, where they allow the exiled Jews to start to return, rebuild the walls, rebuild the temple, then the Greeks roll in. And then after a short period where Israel ruled itself, the Romans roll in. And a certain despair, not a pessimism about God, but a pessimism of where God would choose to reward the faithfulness of Israel, starts to shift from this world to the next one. And what was fascinating for me then is to see the way the New Testament is, if the Old Testament ends eschatologically here, and by the way, it's really nice to have a coffee mug on your show. I know it's not a regular feature, and I appreciate you spending the money to buy me a special one for today.
You're welcome.
If the Old Testament ends here, the New Testament doesn't start right here in terms of the end. It starts over here with the idioms of Jesus. I think you're into Matthew 24. The imagery that Jesus uses is being developed in this intervening period, right? The intertestamental period during Second Temple Judaism.
Which was roughly about 400 years.
Yeah. So that's what I did.
Okay, all right. And I'm sure that was very clear to all of our viewers, but it certainly is clear to me. And I find it fascinating that you have focused in on this, because right now, as it turns out, today and throughout the course of this month, I'll be dealing with Matthew 24, 25, 26, where Jesus talks about the end of time. And so maybe I won't even need to teach after interviewing you. I'll just sort of stand there and sit there and look at the camera. Moving right along.
Which would be a first, would it not be, Jim?
It might be. Let's just step back for a bit, Van. I've got you 4 interviews, so I'm really pleased about that. You're a preacher's kid. As am I. You cut your teeth on a Pentecostal church pew. Your dad, Bob Johnson, was a very high-profile pastor in Montreal. He was high-profile for a number of reasons, not the least of it being he had this very popular radio show. What was it called? Ask the Pastor?
Ask the Pastor.
Ask the Pastor. And
that's right, there you go.
He had a terrific radio voice and a great way with people.
Yeah.
But, you're a preacher's kid. A lot of preacher's kids kind of grow up with a jaundiced view of the church. They, as soon as they can get out of it, they get out of it. They have no interest in continuing in the faith, or they become very rebellious for a period of time. You seem to have come through relatively unscathed.
Yeah.
Why?
Don't ask me why. I don't know. I mean, if I had a formula, right, I'd pass it to every pastor who's going to have kids.
Yeah.
I really don't know why. I'm really thankful. Even rebellious kids are influenced positively by their parents. But I just never really felt the desire to turn from what I had found to be true and meaningful. And Jim, I don't know. Wish you hadn't asked me. I don't know that.
Yeah, you can't ask that one, huh? I mean,
No.
looking at...
Do you have a formula?
Well,
You're
no,
not disclosing?
what I would say is that the dad that I knew around the breakfast table was the same dad that I saw in the pulpit. There was a tremendous
that's good.
consistency in his life.
Yeah.
I also was raised by a father who practiced what he preached, especially in terms of the way he treated my mother, his great love and care and concern for my mom, and the way he treated us as kids. I mean, he practiced what he preached, and I think that, just convinced me of the legitimacy of his message.
Okay, well, I'm there with that one. And that's good. And if you can help me figure out more reasons why I never went off the deep end, I'd appreciate it. But that's a really good place to start. Yeah. Dad was the same, and Dad was a Montreal pastor as much as he was a local church pastor. Mm-hmm. He was gone regularly, but when I played a basketball game, no matter what time of day, I'd turn around at the appropriate time, and there he was in the stands. For one season, he actually coached the high school basketball team. I don't think we won a game, but I don't want that to be the remembered part of this 12-minute segment. Right. But there's a dad who cared deeply and a mom who cared deeply and were always accessible. And I admired what he did so much that it formed in me a desire to do something significant too. And because he was so entrepreneurial, it probably got me thinking about things I was not able to do. I often tell my students that the one seminar I will never do, that no one will ever ask me to lead, is how do you know the will of God? Because I have had ideas that were taking me in one direction, and then often when I didn't even see it coming, I ended up going in this direction, and when I did, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. And my dad's entrepreneurial spirit, he built things. So he had this radio program, Ask the Pastor. He opened a group home for kids in trouble because their upbringing had been a difficult one. A saintly mother, but they were the poorest of the poor in Pembroke, Ontario. They were at the bottom of the hill, and the paved road stopped at the top. They were literally on the edge of town. And so Dad never forgot what it was like to be poor. He never forgot what it was like when he walked into that little tent where Pentecostal meetings were going on. So he would build things. He built ministries, he built a charity, and with all of these things, I thought, well, if God's going to use me, if he loves me, then obviously I should be building things. And so, Jim, after loving my studies, high school, McGill, where I did sociology, when I was called by the Bible school in Peterborough, still there, do you want to come and teach? My first reply was, no interest in that. Why would I want to teach? And they said, well, look, we'll call you back in 2 weeks. Because to me, teachers, those are the people who can't really do anything.
Right.
So they stand and they talk about it, and the real people, who actually can do things, they're the ones that go out and do it. So
this is a great start, Van. Van Johnson's my guest, and these interviews will continue all throughout the course of this month. This 12 minutes has gone by really quickly. I'll be back with our Bible teaching segment right after this.
JCT TV is the official voice of WOW, working for orphans and widows. Jim Cantelon is the founder of WOW and has been ministering to orphans and widows in distress for 18 years. WOW's focus is home-based care for the dying. The horizon is vast, with thousands of the least of these in Africa and India. WOW depends on your generous support. To connect with us, you can call us at 1-800-969-9551, or you can visit us online at wowmission.com.
Now, before I get to the surprise I promised off the top of the show, let's pick up where we left off last time. We're in Matthew chapter 24, and beginning with verse 37. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Now, you're going to notice a theme here over the next little bit of Matthew 24 and 25, and it's a ready, not ready theme. Some are going to be ready for the coming Messiah or the coming of, the end of days. Others will not. And Jesus here is speaking to his disciples. He's giving them fair warning that they should be ready. Now, get ready for the surprise. I've had Van Johnson on earlier in the program, and he's going to stick with me for the Bible teaching segment. Van, you need to know, this is the only time we've ever done this, and it's only because you won't go away.
Well, that's right, but I don't know the will of God, so until somebody tells me, I'm just sitting here.
No, I think it's terrific, because in that your specialty as a university professor is the end of days. It's very appropriate to have you here. As we're talking about this. Now, when I'm reading this passage here, what I'm seeing, first of all, is not just the imminence of the coming of Messiah, but also the fact that people will be blindsided by it.
Right.
Some ready, not ready. Some expecting, some not expecting. Like 2 men in the field, one will be taken, the other left. What's up with that? Does that mean the one guy is looking for him, the other isn't? Or is this just Jesus' way of saying that there's going to be some kind of a division of mankind that occurs at the end of days?
Yeah, I wouldn't choose between those two. I think you can say them both. One's ready and one's not, and that will mean that they're going to go in 2 different directions here. So I like the 2 directions you just gave me. I think that's the point.
And that's pretty much the point. I mean, there's nothing really to expand on here other than to make that point. And I guess, when it comes to this expectation of what we would call it the return of Christ, we either have the expectation or we don't. The thing is, I think in our modern world, it's not often preached. It's not often even written about. It was very, very much so when you and I were both kids growing up in a Pentecostal context. I can't remember a wedding, a funeral, any kind of event where the preacher, in most cases it was my dad, wouldn't bring up the soon return of Christ.
Right.
But it seems somehow to be lost.
Right.
Is it lost?
I think it is. And I do think, Jim, there's certain climate change effect here on how we see the future. If things are good for us, the world seems to be going in a positive direction. I think we just sort of settle. And I think when we sense what's going on in the world and we see the dark side, I think then we lean forward. But I do think there's a bit of climate change effect. And I think as we've become more comfortable here, we're no longer watching. We're watching our Apple Watches. We're not necessarily watching the signs of the times. And I think that's what these texts are helping us work through, right, with you. That you've got to keep your eye on this.
In fact, in history, I don't know if there's ever been a time when there's been more war and rumor of war and earthquake and pestilence and horrors, and yet we seem to take it all in stride. Let's carry on then. Verse 42. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. I ran into an ancient rabbinic saying. I don't know if it was from another rabbi when I was in Jerusalem, or he referred me to it. I don't remember. But the saying is this, Van, you'll like it. 3 things come unexpectedly: Messiah, the discovery of a treasure, and a scorpion.
Right, there you go. In descending order.
In descending order.
Right.
But even in the Jewish expectation, Messiah was not going to show up, at the end of a prescribed, systematic, historical, eschatological process. He would come at an hour when no one was expecting him.
Right, right. Which brings back the comment you made earlier about the 88 reasons why Jesus will return in 1988. I think we share a skepticism about anybody who thinks they can say, well, Jesus doesn't know what he's talking about here, that no one knows. We think we can figure it out. And I think that's partly what's created some problems for us.
Yeah. The point Jesus is making here, and friends, we have to just, this is not Jim, this is not Van, this is Jesus talking here. You have to understand the urgency of this thing. He said, I'm going to be coming when I'm not expected. Right. Where there's no, if you will, even possible speculative insight that will inform people. It's going to be at a moment that will take everyone by surprise. And so, in terms of being ready, what does that mean? Certainly, Van, I don't think it means we walk around, looking up and tripping over things.
No.
Maybe what it means is live with heaven in view somehow. Live with the sense that the space and time continuum of which we are now a part is leading to some kind of eternal future.
Yeah.
We're headed somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Acts 1, that transition point.
Right.
They want to know if this is the hour. They want to know, okay, is it finally time? Yeah. And Jesus says, no. Well, here's what I want you to focus on. The Spirit is coming. In other words, you're going to receive power to go do something. Isn't that interesting? The disciples are ready to wrap it up. They've been through enough. Israel's been through enough. Yeah. Okay, finally, and he says, no, not yet. There's something for you to do, and the Spirit's going to enable you to do it. So I think the scene that follows it, right, in Acts 1 is brilliant. They're standing there watching Jesus ascend into heaven, right? It's as if they're this. Yeah. And all of a sudden they have somebody come alongside them and say, why are you standing here, right? Like an angelic visitor. In other words, go do something. Yeah. And I think that's the point. Because he's coming, we don't stand there looking in the sky. Because he's coming, we actually engage all the more pointedly in doing something. Right? It increases our engagement rather than disengages us. Yeah. And I'm always afraid with somebody who's doing too much speculation is they become disengaged. They're staring into the heavens too much.
As a kid, I remember some of the traveling prophetic experts.
Yeah, sure, of course.
You probably do too.
Yeah,
who had
do.
come through.
I do.
And your father, my father would book these guys, in good faith, maybe on the recommendation of other pastors, and these guys would come in. I remember as a kid, because I was there in the church on Saturday while they were setting up. They're putting up these huge charts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
And they're showing you all of the events that will culminate in the return of Christ. And as a kid, I'm what, 8, 9, 10 years of age. I'm looking at this in wide wonder, thinking, oh, gee, Jesus is going to come back before I'm married. There was that sense of finality and urgency. And of course, they were all dead wrong. Right. But the plus side, at least from a biblical perspective, was at least there was some expectation there.
Yes. And that was the great advantage. Yeah. So my tribe Pentecostals, we were into it. The great advantage was it kept us focused on the return of Jesus. The disadvantage was if we thought we had figured out the timing.
Yeah. Friends, just before I end this segment, I think there's an appropriate time to say to you, what I'm saying to myself. We need to live with heaven in mind. We need to live with a day-to-day awareness that we've been created in the image of God. He has indwelt us. This is his unilateral choice. He did this. We didn't ask for this. He did this. He created us in his image. And we have this migratory call, if you will, back to home. Home being where our Father is. And this is what Messiah and the coming of Christ is all about. And as the Bible says, now is the day of salvation. Make that decision now. I'll be back right after this.
Friends, as you know, Jim Cantelon has been offering Cantelon's Casual Commentary as a Bible study supplement to his ongoing exposition of St. Matthew's Gospel on JCT-TV. He's excited to offer Volume 4, which completes the Matthew study. The Transfiguration, Triumphal Entry, Crucifixion, and Resurrection of Jesus Christ are all covered in this volume. Like the first 3 volumes, it's concise, captivating, and casual. To order your copy, you can call, write, or go online. Write to Jim Cantelon today, Post Office Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7, or call us at 519-415-8341. You can also order online at jimcantelontoday.com. Request Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 4, and for a gift in any amount, it will be sent to you. When you place your order, also consider becoming a monthly partner. Remember, your gifts help us build this ministry.
Well, did you enjoy that? I sure did. Van Johnson is terrific. Friends, we need you to support Working for Orphans and Widows. We are the official spokesman now for Working for Orphans and Widows. We're not just a television teaching ministry, we are a missions ministry. WOW was formed by my wife and I 20 years ago as a federal charity. And as you support WOW, you're supporting JCT and vice versa. We put them together. When you do, I'd love to send you one, if not all, of Cantelon's Casual Commentary. This is the entire book of Matthew, and it comprises a lot of teaching that I'm not able to get on the show because of time, and I'd love to send it to you. And remember your best ministry gift to WOW and JCT when you do so. And keep in mind too, friends, that Mark is on its way. As soon as we finish Matthew, we'll be getting into Mark. I've finished writing it. We just have to publish it, and we will be doing so slowly but surely. We're going to get through the entire Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, and John.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon today. P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.